So in many ways, our mind has almost been formed, and it uses measure to justify itself. We've been measured right from when we were born. In fact, from when we were conceived. Our mother was told that's the day he's going to be born. How they work it out, I'm not sure. But, the due date is that. And we were measured from that day on. How heavy is he? How large is she? How, are they walking yet? Are the teeth out yet? When you go to school, right from there, they start to measure you. How well are they doing? When I was at school, they used to put our names in a list, top of the class down to the bottom of the class. And you knew in the class where you were, because that was the measure. And you got to know who was the top of the class, and you got to know who was the bottom of the class. And you thought they were clever and they were stupid. And often you hear the teacher say, are you stupid or what? And so, the measure was the mind. And we measure ourselves. Who am I cleverer than? Who am I, where do I fit in? And ever since then, we've been measured, because everybody we know, we measure. We know what they drive. We know what they do. We know more or less how much money they have. We know whether they have money or not, and where they live, and everything about them. But it's all a measure. But do we know the quality of their relationships? They're 100 times more important than all we own or do. And yet that almost doesn't matter. I mean, you'll get a famous person who's had 3 divorces. Oh, well, that doesn't count. They're a famous person. So it's like what the mind does and what the mind produces and what the mind stands for has become our measure. And the problem is it's given our mind a sense of arrogance, a sense of pride, a sense of, this is how I measure myself. This is who I am. This is what, and so the mind can't embrace what it can't understand. When people are arguing, you can't understand another person's point of view. I'll be counseling a couple, and they'll have a big argument. They'll be telling me about a big argument, and he's got all the points, all the reasons, and she just says, "You don't understand," and walks out. And he says, "Who can understand a woman?" As if women can't reason. But understanding doesn't. The mind, if it doesn't understand, it tends to think it doesn't exist. Science says if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. Well, 90% of our lives are not measurable. You can't measure love. You can't measure connection. You can't measure community. You can't measure substance of being. Most of who we are is not measurable. Even what our mind does is not really measurable. I mean, to get marks in an exam is a very, very tiny piece of the magnificent capability of our mind. Our whole body is a mind, a complex mind. So, but the mind is the one that controls. And so if it doesn't make sense to us, we switch off to it. If it doesn't understand, we reject it. If it doesn't fit in, or if it doesn't comply, we tend to deny it or dismiss it or argue with it or whatever it is. But the mind becomes the place where we engage reality, or not engaged, or disengaged from reality. And the mind has gotten to a place where it almost thinks it's interesting how most of us are conscious of our body, what we eat, how fit we are, how tired we are, when we need to wash. We're in touch with our body's needs, and we manage our bodies. I need a shower. I need to go and have a cup of tea. So we are aware of our needs and we manage them. Our emotions, generally, we know about them. We know what we're feeling and how to respond to what we're feeling. When we're feeling sad, we might do this, or feeling happy, we might do that. So we tend to be in touch with it. Our mind is different. Our mind is almost like I said when I started, our mind is king. We say the mind is what it is. It's the boss. It's the immovable piece. So it's not like I have a mind. It's like I am a mind. And this is who I am. So we don't question our mind. We don't think it needs management. It's got to the point where it's done its own thing and taken us to a point where it controls how we are. And we don't challenge it. We don't question it. And we don't work with it. We don't understand how we actually need to say yes, mind, or no, mind, or I'm going to stop for a while, mind. I mean, you might decide, I want to fast today and not eat. And so your body says, but I'm hungry. And you say, no, it's okay. I need to not eat for today. I'm just want to do some reflection or something. Our mind, we never do that. My mind, I don't want you to think today. I don't want you to overfunction today. Our mind just does this all the time. And now with social media, it's 100 times worse because our mind has got this wonderful love affair with our cell phone, and it just drinks everything that comes through it, ping pong, and our mind's sort of like, it's like, I was counseling a couple last week. He's always on his cell phone or on his computer, and she says, well, I can't talk to him. He just taps me when he wants sex, but otherwise it's like he's in his cell phone all the time. So, well, this is not going to last long, I can promise you. She's going to get tired of waiting for you to get off your phone so our mind has got into, and if you Google persuasive technology, it's scary how they've developed technology that understands how we function and how to addict us to mind connection. And we become totally hooked. I mean, just ask any teenager what their relationship with Facebook is, and they look at you sort of starry-eyed and wondering what you're asking, because this is their life. They can't imagine not being on Facebook or whatever other TikTok or whatever they're on. So we're getting to a place where our mind is being so drawn into something, and we don't question it. We just go along with it unless something goes wrong. When our mind sort of starts feeling like I can't cope, usually it shows emotionally because our relational side starts to suffer in some way. We might go to a doctor, or we might go to a psychiatrist or somebody, and they say, oh, well, your mind's got a disease, or your mind's got a dysfunction. We need to help your mind to get back onto serotonin or whatever, and they'll give you medication. There's nothing wrong with our mind. There's nothing wrong with our mind. Our minds don't go off the rails that easily. Our body is an amazing organism that tends to right itself. We have habituated our mind and allowed it to do what it's doing and not questioned it. And so it's sort of like got itself into such a tangle that it can't untangle itself. And the medication doesn't help. I mean, it's a good bridge when we realize we're not coping. But don't think of it as a permanent solution, because all it does is tries to rearrange the chemicals in your brain, the hormones, which actually just damps them down. It can't fix the problem. It can just conceal the problem. And so you get used to being a little bit more sort of passive, but it's not going to untangle the tangle that we've got ourselves into. So we're needing to get into a place where we actually realize I need to manage my mind appropriately. I'm the boss. Not in those words, but I'm responsible for my mind, for the functioning of my mind, like I'm responsible for my body. I'm responsible for everything about my life. And my mind is not an exception. And we've tended to get into the place where we think that our mind is what it is, and we've lost the tools for managing it. And it's helpful to realize that we can manage and we need to manage, and there are ways of training our mind, of shaping our mind, of directing our mind, of controlling our mind, not to diminish it, but to actually give it containment, to give it management, to give it actually more power, to give it more ability to be the amazing mind that it is, and not to be, like our body, eating junk food all the time and wondering why you sort of not very well. And our mind gets into patterns which are not helpful, which are in a way arrogant, because they think that I know that what I don't know, I don't need to know. And so there's almost like a closed mind. And it's interesting that those who think they're very open-minded are often the ones who are most close-minded, because they think they've got all the answers. And if you come along with a different story, they say, oh no, it's not like that, it's like this. And they're not even willing to look or dialogue or understand or incorporate Because surely if somebody else has a different perspective, surely there's some way to incorporate that and say, oh, actually, yeah, that's an interesting aspect that I hadn't considered. So I wanted just for a few minutes to reflect on what in your own life, what aspect of relationship, and you've all got relationships with your family, with your friends, with your partners, with children maybe, what aspect of relationship does your mind not understand? What problem do you have with you in your relationships that your mind thinks, I'm not happy in that area? She's difficult, or he never listens, or I haven't seen them for 6 months and I don't want to see them, or I need them to agree with me and to, whatever. I mean, every relationship you've got has got some issues you haven't resolved. So don't think all your relationships are perfect. There's no such thing. So just ask yourself, in terms of our mind and the relationship of our mind with parts of itself that it doesn't understand, just ask yourself, why am I having these issues in relationship and my mind can't resolve them? Does that make sense?